Okay, so I mentioned that we could test this with some curl commands. I'm going to skip that one right there. I want to look at something that has some data in it. So what I am doing, okay, this ugly code right here is an implementation of this query. So that's why I left this query here so you could read it. So you can see that I'm going to do a query and I'm going to ask for the role of software developer inside employees. So the way you read this is that I want to get all the employees whose role is software developer. That's the way you read that part. And then when you find those, I would like their name and their role. And that's the way you read that. And that's the same as this ugly curl command right here. So let me copy that right there. We'll paste that down here and then hit enter. And you could see the result right there. So the result is this part right here, and that's all JSON data. So you can see we're getting the data, then we're getting the employees. It's going to be this list of data. So the name is Maria, role is software developer, and then the name here is Peter, and the role is software developer right there. And I could change this query right here, but this approach is really so ugly and hard to read that I want to get away from it as soon as possible and start using browser. So bear with me just a moment. I'm going to get a browser for us. Okay, so I'm going to start with a big browser right away, and then we will make that smaller as we go along. But I want you to see the initial information that comes up here. Okay, so when I call that URL, you see we get a nice little welcome screen right here. Welcome to GraphQL. It's an in-browser tool for writing, validating, and testing GraphQL queries. So what happens is you type queries in over here, and then we'll get the results over here. So it shows an example GraphQL query might look like that. And then there are some shortcuts here. I might keep those shortcuts available, but I'm going to delete everything else so we have some room to work with here. And now I can make this smaller so we can see. What I want to do is move that over there. Now I have this other file over here that's full of Caliban queries. So the first couple here are introspection queries. I'll come back to those. The thing I want to focus on right now is just getting some data. So this one is get the DevOps team. So it's basically what we just saw, except now we're getting DevOps. So we'll copy that right there. And we could paste that in here, say run. And then we see the information coming back from our Caliban server. So we have data coming back, and then our list of employees is Alex and Roberta. And because we're querying with DevOps, I'm not sure that it makes sense to actually include the role here. It can in certain circumstances, but what I want to show is if you don't want it, just delete that and then resubmit your query. And now you just get the names of the employees, and you don't have to worry about the role because we already know that we're querying for DevOps employees. So that's the first one right there. And I want to mention before I go on that this information, this file right here, and all these queries is going to be in the GitHub repository. So if I run through these too quickly for you, or if I don't run through all of them, just go ahead and access the GitHub repository and you'll find those there. And I was pausing for a moment there because I was trying to see the difference between this query and this one. And the difference is that this one is named Get Developer. So you can have a query like this one that does not have a name. And then you can have the same query here and apply a name to it like get developer. So here I will go nameless and say query that. And again, you see similar information to what we've already seen. And then this would be get site reliability engineer, but we don't need to do that because we've already seen that. This one is different. So let's try that one. This one says find an employee by their name. So we're looking for an employee with the name Maria right there. So let's go ahead and run that one and do that. So there we have Maria, name and role, and it's name and role right here. And again, you can always delete these values here that you don't want. So if you knew that the name was going to be Maria and you just wanted the role, that's one possible way you could do that. This is find non-existent employee. I like that one. So we don't have anyone named John in our data. So if we go over here and we run this query again, now what happens is employee comes back as a null value because there are no employees named John in our list of employees. That's going to come back as null like that. And I should probably mention that this null value here has nothing to do with Scala or a Caliban per se. You know, in the functional programming world, we really don't like nulls. But this is the way GraphQL deals with an empty list right there. One more query I want to show over here is that you could do multiple queries at one time. And this is a huge difference between GraphQL and REST. So you can see that we can have this query here. We want to find all DevOps employees in that query. We want to find all software developers in this one, all site reliability engineers in this one. And we also want to find an employee named James right here as a specific person. So what we're doing is 1, 2, 3, 4 different queries at the same time. And to do that in the REST world, we'd have to make a query here, another one here, and another one here. But in GraphQL, we can do them all at one time. So let's take that, come back over here, paste that in. And now you can see the results from all 4 queries at one time. We have the DevOps team, the developers, site reliability engineers, and then a specific person right there. So this is a really nice demonstration of one of the advantages of GraphQL is being able to make all those queries at one time. And again, being very specific about what you want in terms of roles right here, and then the data that you're actually looking for within each query. So that's the last of the data queries. Now what I want to do is I will show this first one. There's something I don't like about this first one. I can't remember what it is. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Do that down. And I probably need to improve my query a little bit, but this is a way of trying to figure out what data types the server says it can work with. So it's saying I can work with Boolean, employee, float, int, queries, role, and string. And then these other ones we don't have to worry about here with the 2 underscores. But I think I need to improve this query because the only thing I'd be interested in would be employee and role. And I want to know more about where role is used. This query is interesting, but this query is much, much better for what it gives us. So I want to copy that, paste that in there. So again, this is an introspection query, and I'm going to need more of the screen for this one. So now this makes me much happier. So you could see the code that we're using over here. We're saying query type, then we're saying I want to look at the fields. So when I look for fields like that, and then I have name, description, and arguments, you can see that I have a couple of values under fields. This first area from here to here is all for the employees call right there. And then this one down here is going to be for the employee without the S right there. So let's take a look at this one first. So the name that I can pass in is called employees. The description says return all employees with a specific role. And if you remember from our source code over here, we had that right here, return all employees with specific role. So now you can see where this GraphQL description that we're applying to employees here is coming in over here. So that's this description right there. Then if I come back here to our query, now I'm saying I want to look at the arguments. And the important part here is that I can pass in a name, it's called role. And if you dig through here, you'll find that the type is role right here. So there's some null values, and these are to be expected for what we're doing. But basically what's going on is we could say that the server is expecting a parameter named role. It cannot be null. That's what this non-null means. This guy right here is an unfortunate artifact, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. And then the type of role is shown right here, that role, capital role right there. And we know from our code that it's an enumeration, and you can actually see that in the introspection query over here. Let's skip those null values for just a moment and look at this other one. So here's the employee query. There's the description that we gave it over in the source code right here, find an employee. And then the arguments that it will take is name. Name cannot be null, and it is a string, and technically string is a scalar variable. So I'm not too worried, I think, about the kind, especially right now. And I don't like these null values right there. So this null value is null because non-null is actually something like a wrapper type, I believe. And wrapper types don't have a name. So technically, I don't know that there's any reason to keep that. Maybe in other queries there is, but in this one there's not. So we can get rid of that null value very easily. And then the second one is null because we've reached the end of the type chain. So if I remember right, what happens here is you can see how we're doing a little bit of recursion here. We're saying of type, kind, and name. And then inside of there, we're saying of type, kind, and name. So we're doing a little bit of recursive work right there. But in reality, we only have a role and a role in this query, and then we only have a name, which is a string in this query. So that recursion is not necessary. So technically, I think you could delete that for this particular use case and get rid of that. And then this is probably what you would expect to see in this use case. But with more complicated queries, you may want that other information. So that's why I left that information over in this file right here, in case you do need that for other queries. Okay, so this is what's meant by introspection. And you can use this information like we've done here. So here this is called employee. So I say I want to call employees, and then the parameter name is role right there. And then I want to have the DevOps role. The one thing I did not show is how to get all the roles. Okay, I was going to leave this as an exercise for the reader, but I really didn't like to do that. I didn't want to leave you in a situation like that because in case you couldn't find the answer for this. So what I'm showing here in this query is how to inspect the role enumeration. So what we're doing here is we're saying name and kind, then we're saying give me the enumeration values and the name and description right there. So we have the name is role, that's this role right there. It is an enumeration. And then we get the values here. So that's DevOps, Site Reliability Engineer, and Software Developer. You don't need description in this case. Maybe in other situations you might need that, but we don't need that there. So we could reduce that query to just this. But I'll go ahead and put that back in there. And I want to add this query to the GitHub information over here. So I will say introspection query to get all roles. And then similarly, if we come over here and delete that, paste this in, this is a query that you can use to get all the employee information. So we'll do that. So again, I have these null values in here again. Please delete whatever you don't need. But what I want to show is that here is the employee information. So we saw the employee information with this earlier query here and here, both of those queries actually. And now we could say, well, I just want to look at the employee information and get information about its name and its fields that it has. So there's the name employee, and you can see it has these fields. So it has a field name, which is non-null, and that one's a string. And then it also has this field name role, cannot be null, and this one is a role enumeration. So that's the way you read that information as well. And the reason I'm coming back and mentioning both of these queries, this one here and in this previous one that I just showed right there, is that there is no way you could create this query right here on the left side of the screen right here. There's no way you could have created this query if you did not see the source code first. So I wanted to show you how to create these queries, because of course you're not always going to have the server-side source code to look at. So this is introspection query to get employee information. Okay, so now that I have shown you those queries, now I would expect that you would be able to put these queries together like this. Employees has a role, and then we can query for name and role for each employee, and so on for each of these queries that we have right through there. And then this one, employee name Maria, and employee has name and role, and so on. So I think you should be able to put all those queries together now that we have the proper introspection queries that we need. Don't necessarily need that first one, I think, but you definitely want the second query right here, this one to get the role information, that one to get the employee information, and then you can start writing your data queries like that right there. Again, this information is in this file. It's going to be called 200 Caliban queries.md. And now that we've gone through that, let's just do a recap of what we have here. First, we had all the Scala CLI dependencies that we need to run this application here at the top. Add some information there. These are the first imports we need, ZIO, and then all these Caliban imports. Then we went into our domain modeling. Remember that this is all just plain Scala code right here, right here, right here. And then when we come down to queries, this is creating queries like I showed in the slides before. So we have these two queries. One is for employees. The other one is for employee, as you see right there. Then we create our ZIO application, extend ZIO app default. As I mentioned, these two import lines are really, really important for the automatic derivation that Caliban is doing for us. And I wish there was some way to emphasize how important those two lines are. Then we have our Scala list of employees right there. Then we have the implementation of our run value right here. And you saw all this in the previous slides. And then inside of queries, this is our implementation of queries. This was the description or definition of the queries case class. And then down here, we have an implementation of queries, including the implementation of how to find all the employees here using filter, and then how to find one employee right here using the find command. And then finally, after GraphQL is called right there, we add a run server call at the end of that, and the port and the path information right there. And the last thing to stress, again, is that Caliban is built on top of ZIO HTTP, which is built on top of ZIO. And given all that information, I hope this first Caliban example has been helpful.